नहमदुहु व नुसल्ली अला रसूलिहिल करीम अम्मा बाद फ़ऊज़ु बिल्लाहि मिनश शैतानिर रजीम बिस्मिल्लाहिर रहमानिर रहीम अस्सलामु अलैकुम व रहमतुल्लाहि व बरकातुहू. Dear listeners, if you remember from our previous lectures, we are continuing on the life of the Holy Prophet. Today is our 10th lecture in the series. And we've talked about the conditions of Arabia before the birth of the Holy Prophet. We've talked about the various political conditions, the social conditions, the various kingdoms in place, the various empires in place, the various religions that are practiced, and then we started from the birth of the Holy Prophet. And now we are at a stage where we are embarking into the fourth year of the life of the Holy Prophet after receiving his prophethood. So in the third year, if you remember, in the third year of the Holy Prophet's prophethood, he was asked to spread the word of Islam, to warn his closest relatives. وَأَنذِرْ عَشِيرَتَكَ الْأَقْرَبِينَ, so warn your closest relatives. And with that thought in mind, he started communicating with the Quraysh. And it took the Quraysh, I would say, almost a year to catch up, to understand what this would mean for them. How the worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, giving up idol worship, focusing on justice and social justice and equality and kindness, and giving up adultery and fornication, how it was going to affect their life, how it was going to affect their power, how it was going to affect their influence in society. And so now they started reacting to it. So this opposition to the Holy Prophet, of which we will just give you a very, very small glimpse, started in the beginning of the fourth year and continued to escalate and expand until it came to its pinnacle in the middle of the fifth year of prophethood, and also then escalated beyond that, but the parameters were different. So I want to tell you something interesting, that as the Holy Prophet would continue his preachings, he did not have complete protection from this oppression too. He was, even though he was the nephew of Abu Talib, who was considered the leader of the community, even though he was very respected, he had a very strong family background, he had a big tribe of the Quraysh behind him. But because, even though all of this, but because he was causing this revolutionary change in society, he was not safe from this oppression, as we have described in the last lecture. And he was also, however, he was, I would say, the person who did not conduct his worship in secrecy or in silence. He worshipped in the Haram, in the Kaaba, in broad daylight in front of everybody, and he preached openly. So one of the interesting things I want to point out is that Abu Jahl would also come, who was also considered a leader of the community, younger than Abu Talib, would come sometimes and listen to the Quran as the Holy Prophet would recite it. But he would not listen to it to follow it. He would not listen to it to adhere to its principle. He would listen to it and then he would mock it, he would make fun of it, he would scorn and ridicule the Holy Prophet and his preachings. So there were two types of oppositions overall that the Muslim faced. If you were somebody who had a big tribe, a big clan, a strong following, if you had a lot of following in the community, if you were well established, then Abu Jahl would go yell and scream and curse the person. He would threaten them. He would say that you will come to financial losses at our hands if you continue on this pathway. And so this would be for the people who were very well established in society, who had social standing, who had some hierarchy. But the people who were poor, the people who were oppressed, the people who didn't have a strong family background, the people who didn't have a big tribe behind them, and especially the slaves, a large number of whom were converting to this message of Islam because of its social justice, because of the value of equality, because of the value of kindness. They were converting to Islam, and they were being the subject of physical torture and abuse, significant physical torture of abuse. Some of them lost their lives. So this lecture is going to expound on some of those things. So what to navigate this difficult terrain of social life, the Holy Prophet's companions and the slave women and men and people who were oppressed, and most of them started worshipping secretly. They would go into places of hiding and they would worship in those areas. Sometimes they would run into mountain passes. small narrow passages that go up the mountain where they would be uninterrupted and they would be undisturbed, and they would carry out their worship. And as we said, that at this time there was no salah, there was no formal 5-time daily prayer. But we know also that the Muslims used to pray in the morning and in the evening, essentially at dawn and sunset, or sunrise and sunset. And we don't know the exact process of prayer, but we do know that the Muslims used to conduct their prayer in the morning and in the evening. So about Abu Jahl, it is said that the messenger was conducting his worship. He came to the Holy Prophet, he listened to the Quran, and then he turned around and he did not accept it. And in fact, he denied it. And he turned around and he went to his family in arrogance. And then this kind of behavior only he could show, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Qiyamah, فَلَا صَدَّقَ وَلَا صَلَّى, he who did not accept and he did not pray. And some of the narrators say فَلَا صَدَّقَ does not mean he did not accept or he did not confirm the prophethood. It basically means he did not give sadaqah, he did not give charity. So فَلَا صَدَّقَ, he did not confirm the prophethood of the Holy Prophet, وَلَا صَلَّى, and he did not pray. وَلَكِنْ كَذَّبَ وَتَوَلَّى, in fact he denied him and he turned around to his family. وَلَكِنْ كَذَّبَ وَتَوَلَّى أَوْلَى لَكَ فَأَوْلَى ثُمَّ أَوْلَى لَكَ فَأَوْلَى. So this is the behavior that behooves only you. This is the behavior only suitable to you. So this is kind of the Surah Qiyamah addressing Abu Jahl and saying that this is the behavior that only you can show. There is also a famous narration that the Holy Prophet was praying at the Maqam Ibrahim, where we also go and offer prayers during the season of Hajj. And he was praying at the place of the Maqam Ibrahim, the station of Abraham. And Abu Jahl came to him and said, "What are you doing? I told you not to pray here. Why are you praying here? You should cease and desist." And the Holy Prophet said that he would continue to pray. And so Abu Jahl threatened the Prophet, yelled at him. So the Prophet also scolded him. And he said that, فَأَوْلَى لَكَ فَأَوْلَى ثُمَّ أَوْلَى لَكَ فَأَوْلَى. This behavior only suits you. This behavior only suits you. So there's a lot of ayahs in the Quran that are responding to Abu Jahl's behavior. He's very unfortunate in that way that he died on kufr. And so on this particular instance, when the Holy Prophet was praying in the Maqam Ibrahim, he also said that Abu Jahl said to the Holy Prophet, don't you threaten me, don't you scold me, don't you chide me, don't you stop me. You don't know that I have the biggest following in Mecca, and if I were to call my followers, they would overrun you. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Alaq, if you remember, the first 5 ayahs of Surah Alaq were revealed were the first revelation, but the rest of the Surah Alaq was revealed later, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَلْيَدْعُ نَادِيَ. So go ahead, call your supporters. سَنَدْعُ الزَّبَانِيَ. We are going to call the angels of punishment. We are going to call the angels of torment. If you are going to call your followers of Makkah, we're going to call our followers. سَنَدْعُ الزَّبَانِيَ كَلَّا لَا تُطِعْهُ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to the Holy Prophet, don't obey this man. وَاسْجُدْ وَاقْتَرِبْ. Prostrate and come closer to your Lord. So this is another set of ayahs in response to Abu Jahl's behavior. So we continue by saying that let's talk about individuals. Let's talk about individuals who were the subject of this torture and abuse. Uthman bin Affan radiallahu, he came from a very, very rich family of Banu Umayyah. He was very affluent. And what his uncle would do is his uncle would take like a spread or a sheet made of date palm leaves. He would wrap Uthman bin Affan, tie a rope to this sheet, and he would smoke him from underneath as a means of physical abuse and torture toward him. So when you hear these stories, you will understand that Muslims from the very early times were the subject of a lot of abuse and torture, and they were very steadfast and patient and gracious in this difficult time that they faced, never wavering, never returning it back, never retorting, and never resorting to violence, and being very, very strong and steadfast. So the faith here did not come to us for free. It did not come to us easy. We have to show utmost respect to our way of life because it came through a lot of difficult stages in the past, and it is how it got to us. Mus'ab bin Umair came from a very affluent family. He was was very spoiled. He was lived in life in wealth and luxury. And when his mother found out that he had accepted Islam, his mother kicked him out of the house. She stopped feeding him and clothing him. And so outside in the heat of the sun and the drought and the difficulty with no food and water, the skin completely peeled off his body. His skin peeled off his body because of the difficult conditions, no food, no water, and also tattered and torn with difficult circumstances. This is what happened to him. Bilal radiallahu, on the other hand, was the slave of Umayyah bin Khalf. And so what Umayyah used to do is when Bilal Habashi, the African slave, when he accepted Islam, he would tie a rope in the neck of Bilal radiallahu, and he would give this rope to the scoundrels, the rogues of the neighborhood, and the boys. And so these guys would take this rope, which was wrapped around the neck of Bilal, and they would walk him around the desert. They would take him up the mountains with no food and water. And then when he would come down in the middle of the day, Umayyah bin Khalf would lay him on his bare back on the hard sand and the heated stones, and he would put a big rock on his chest, a big stone on his chest, so he couldn't get up. And Bilal would only say Ahad, Ahad, the one, instead of the worship of multiple entities. So he faced a lot of this difficulty until Abu Bakr Siddiq saw this torture and abuse one day and purchased Bilal radiallahu from Umayyah bin Khalf for a large amount of money and released him and freed him, and that's how Hazrat Bilal Habshi became free. Ammar Yasir and his father and mother, they were also slaves. Ammar Yasir's father was tortured and abused, and one day the Holy Prophet saw Ammar Yasir being tortured and abused, and he came to Ammar Yasir and said that I only see heaven for you in the future, so be steadfast and be patient. And Ammar Yasir's dad eventually died of this torture of abuse. And Ammar Yasir's mom, Sumayya, Abu Jahl, took a spear and he speared the private part of this lady of Sumayya radiallahu and martyred her. And so these are essentially the first martyrs in the cause of Islam in the time of the Holy Prophet. Ammar Yasir's father and Ammar Yasir's mother was the first Shahida. And Ammar Yasir was tortured a lot. And when they were torturing him, they kept saying that either curse the Holy Prophet or say good things about Lat and Uzza, which were the gods of the Quraysh. And so eventually Ammar Yasir became weak from the torture and abuse, and he praised Lat and Uzza. And then he came running to the Holy Prophet crying and saying, I have made a grave sin, I have made an error. And this ayah of Surah Nahl, so ayah 106 was revealed that those who turn away from Iman after accepting Iman and they turn to Kufr, those people are destroyed. But the people who were forced to do it and their heart was complete and safe and their heart was at peace on Islam, then there is no grip on them, there is no punishment for them, there is no difficulty for them because they did this. So there was this another Sahabi, his name was Faqiha or Aflah. He was the slave of a tribe called Bani Abduddar, a big tribe. And what they would do is they would tie a rope on his foot and they would drag him around on the hot sand as a means of punishment. So I'm not getting into the details, I'm just giving you a glimpse. And the reason is to understand that the transition of this faith from its early followers down 1400 and some years to us has been a difficult and perilous journey, and so we have to treat it with the utmost respect. It's a sacred faith, it's a great way of life, and also understand that this standing steadfast and patient in the path of difficulty is a way of our ancestors, and we need to do the same thing. And we should not ever become oppressors to people who oppress us. We should also always return it with kindness, and we should defend and protect ourselves, but we should return hostility with kindness. Idfa billati hiya ahsan, so return and repulse evil with goodness until you find that your bad enemies, your worst enemies, become your devout and ardent fans. So another couple of slave girls, Ziniyara, Nahdiya, and daughter of Nahdiya, Abis. These were slave women. They were punished significantly. There was another slave girl, Mumal from Bani Adi, and Umar bin Khattab was also from Bani Adi. So Umar bin Khattab would beat this slave girl so much. So Ziniyara, Nahdiya, and Nahdiya's daughter Abis were tortured and abused significantly. So these are also Sahabiyat. And so Mumal, who was from Bani Adi, would take a beating from Umar bin Khattab, and then he would leave her alone and say, I'm not leaving you because I am forgiving you. I'm only leaving you because I'm exhausted and I cannot beat you anymore. This was the time before Umar bin Khattab became a Muslim. And so Abu Bakr radiallahu, who was a very kind and generous man and socially had some influence and also had some money, released Bilal radiallahu. He released Amir bin Fuhira. He purchased them. He also purchased the slave girls, which we talked about, Nadia and Zunaira and Abis, and released them from the grip of slavery. So another way of torture and abuse was that they would take the raw skin of an animal. When the skin was still wet, they would wrap the Muslim person of their tribe into it, and they would leave them on the hot sand, so it would dry and shrivel, and it would crush the person, but they would also feel the heat from this. So this is various forms of physical torture, cruelty, and abuse that the Muslims faced. To counter the situation, the Holy Prophet asked the Muslims to worship secretly, and also to meet secretly in places where they could not be detected. So the Muslims would go up narrow passages that would go up the mountains, and so they would climb up and they would do their prayers. And there was one time when the Muslims were praying in these narrow passages, and the group of Quraysh came upon them, and the Quraysh challenged them and tried to punish them and torture them and abuse them, at which Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas, who was very young at the time as a Muslim, struck one of the people of the Quraysh, and the person bled. And so this was kind of the first blood, did not kill him but injured him, was shed in the path of Islam when Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas encountered. But the Holy Prophet quickly realized that if Muslims face this type of torture, abuse and cruelty, and if it is growing exponentially, they will eventually be extinct, they will become eradicated, they will be vanishing from society. So he asked them to exercise extreme caution, to pray secretly and to meet secretly. And so there was this young man, or young boy. His name was Arqam ibn Abil Arqam, and he was only 11 years old when he accepted Islam. And his house was on the mountain of Safa, on Koh Safa, and it was on the other side of Koh Safa, so it was not visible to the people of Mecca in the market and in the main passages. And so the Holy Prophet chose that as a meeting point where the Muslims used to meet, they used to plan, they used to decide who they were going to go and exhort to, and who they were going to spread the message of Islam to. And so this house of Arqam ibn Abil Arqam became a central meeting place for planning the activities of the Muslim. So if we look at the profile, let's take an overview on what was happening here. The Holy Prophet, in his first 3 years of prophethood, goes to his closest family, his closest relatives, his closest friends. He basically exhorts to them. A group of Muslims are prepared, and then he takes this message out to the general community of Quraysh. And who responds to it? If you look at who responds to this, the people who first respond to that very, very positively are the people who had no rights in society. They were the people who were oppressed in society. The very, very old people, like Ammar Yasir's dad and mom. The people who were very, very young, like Ali ibn Abi Talib, who was his relative. If you look at Arqam ibn Abil Arqam, he was 11 years old. Qabbab bin Arat was 20, Suhaib Rumi was 20, Sayyid bin Zaid was 19, Ibn Masud was only 14, Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas was 17, Jafar ibn Abi Talib was 18, Zubair bin Awwam was 18. So the very young people who had no rights in society, and they had no social justice, they weren't treated as equals. So the people who were very young, the people who were very old, and especially the slaves. There were a lot of slaves, and the slaves had no rights. They were tortured and abused. And there were generations of slave families that were continuing, who were being tortured and abused without any social justice, without any mercy, without any kindness. They felt strongly about this faith, and they came into the fold of Islam. And so look at the profile: the very young, the very old, the oppressed people, the slaves, because this was the religion that was going to offer them equal rights, social justice, peace, kindness, and an acceptance into society with equality and social justice. So this, I want you to understand that this is kind of the profile of the people who came into Islam. And obviously the people who were rich, the people who were in power, the people who were in authority rebelled, because accepting Islam and accepting the superiority of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and giving up this idol worship, giving up fornication, giving up adultery, giving up a lot of these bad deeds, this tribalism would essentially make them lose their authority, and they were not comfortable with it, is why all of this happened. And so in this time, in the middle of the 5th year of prophethood, so Rajab is what, the 7th month of the Islamic calendar. In the 7th month, which is in the month of Rajab, in the 5th year of prophethood, the Holy Prophet planned an immigration. And he decided, and he thought about where the best place to go, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guided him that the best place to go for this immigration would be Habasha, or Ethiopia. Ethiopia was considered a superpower at the time. I described in earlier lectures that Iran was the biggest superpower of the time. Ethiopia was kind of the number 2 second superpower, and the Byzantine Empire of Eastern Europe was the number 3 power of the time. So the Holy Prophet said that in Habasha there is or Ethiopia, there is the kingdom of the Emperor Najashi, or his title was Najashi or Negus, and his name was Ashaba. So Ashaba Najashi was a fair and just ruler, and Muslims could potentially find some protection from it. So in the 5.5 years into prophethood, the Holy Prophet guided a tour of people to immigrate or escape to Habasha. There were 12 men and 4 women. The Holy Prophet's son-in-law Usman bin Affan was the leader of this group. His daughter Ruqayya, who was the wife of Usman bin Affan, was also in this group. So the Holy Prophet said that after the immigration of 2 prophets earlier, that this was Noah and Lut, this was basically the first immigration of a family for the cause of Islam. So around this time, in the 5th year of prophethood, Surah Kahf was revealed. And in Surah Kahf, as you know, that the 3 people who faced the number of people who faced oppression from the king of the local time had to immigrate, and they immigrated to a cave. And so when Surah Kahf was revealed, this was a sign to the Holy Prophet that leaving the town or immigrating would be a good thing. And also in Surah Kahf we have the narration of Musa and Khizr, where it tells us that whatever appears to us in front in the obvious sense is different from what the results are going to be. So combine this with the messages of Surah Kahf, that you immigrate when you have difficulty, as they immigrated to the cave, they fled town. Whatever you see in front is different from what is the reality, and what seems as the obvious results are different from what's actually happening. And also in this time, in this surah is the story of Zulqarnain, right? That in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that this is God's land, and God's land is vast. God's land is big. Don't limit yourself only to Mecca or Medina. You have to move on beyond into the God's vast land. And then also in this time, Surah Zumar was revealed, and Surah Zumar tells us, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decides who the inheritors, the right to inheritance of this earth are to the pious people. So combine all these messages between Surah Kahf and Surah Zumar. The Holy Prophet planned this immigration, and this group of people left there. Okay, so in the 5th year of prophethood, 12 men, 4 women, they escape Mecca in the middle of the night. And then they go to this seaport called Shu'aybiyah, which is on the Red Sea. And they luckily find 2 trade vessels, 2 ships conducting commerce, and these ships are about to leave. They request to board them. They are granted permission, and so they get on board these ships, and they escape to Habasha. In the morning, the Quraysh find out, and they pursue these people to the seaport, but they found that the ships are already gone, and it is already too late. And so they cannot do anything. So when this group of people are in Habasha, the Holy Prophet one day is reciting the Quran in the Haram. So there's a large gathering of the Quraysh. They are having a meeting, and the Holy Prophet suddenly gets up and he starts reciting Surah Najm. And he recites the last ayah of Surah Najm, فَاسْجُدُوا لِلَّهِ وَعَبُدُوا. So prostrate to your Lord and only worship Him. And when he recites that, it has such an influence of the Quraysh, who are all idol worshippers, anti-Islam, that they all prostrate. They all go in sujood. And this news of the Quraysh going into sujood goes all the way to Habasha. And this group of people find out that the Quraysh have converted. They don't get the whole message. And they essentially return back. But when they are only one day away, one day's journey away from Mecca, they find out that that's not the truth. The Quraysh, under the influence of the Quran, temporarily prostrated, but they have not converted to Islam. Some of them return back to Habasha, and some of them find people from the Quraysh who will give them peace and take them back with them to their town. So what happened was, when this incident happened, the people who were present, the leaders of the Quraysh, they were heavily scolded and chided by the people who were not present. That what's wrong with you? You prostrated because the Holy Prophet recited the Quran in front of you. Shame on you. So they made an excuse and they said that we only did this because the Holy Prophet was praising our deities and they were praising our gods, and this was obviously not the truth. So this was just a very, very short glimpse to understand that the difficulties the early Muslims faced when the Holy Prophet first started spreading Islam, and the social challenges. So understand the group of people who accepted Islam were the very oppressed, the very old, the very, very young, the slaves, the poor people, the people who didn't have any tribal origins, they didn't have big family backgrounds, they didn't have a big tribe in town, and how the Quraysh responded to them by verbally insulting and assaulting the people who were rich, but also physically being cruel and torturous to the people who were poor. Jazakallahu khair. And so inshallah we'll continue with our 11th lecture the next time and continue with our second immigration to Habasha, which happened shortly after, which was a larger group of people. There were about over 100 people in that group. There were, I believe, 118 or so men in that group, and so but definitely more than 100 people, and we will talk about the description of that immigration and what happened and what the Quraysh did to send a group of people, a group of two emissaries, two ambassadors to Habasha to try to capture and retrieve those people and get them expelled from Ethiopia, and the incident surrounding how Najashi refused to expel them from his territory. Jazakallahu khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.